Hi, everyone, and welcome to this special episode of the Jackson Heights Beautification Group podcast. I'm your guest host, Chad Tyndall, and I am one of the trumpet players in the Jackson Heights Orchestra. Today, we're joined by Patricia Glunt, though she generally goes by her nickname Pat. Pat is an accomplished musician, educator, and conductor. A Californian by birth, she honed her violin performance skills at the prestigious Sibelius Academy in Helsinki and earned her master's in music education from Queens College in New York. Over her 25-year career with the New York City Department of Education, she was an influential string teacher, supervisor for citywide music programs, and an interim acting director of music. Pat has a rich history with some of New York's most prestigious music institutions, including the New York Philharmonic and Juilliard. After retiring in 2010, she continued to inspire as an adjunct professor at Hunter College and New York University, where she mentored new music teachers in New York City. But our primary spotlight today is on her role as the founder and artistic director of the Jackson Heights Orchestra in Queens. Now entering its second decade, Pat's leadership has been instrumental in the orchestra's success. Her outstanding contributions to music education and her work with the Jackson Heights Orchestra have earned her numerous accolades, including being named New Yorker of the Week by Time Warner Cable in 2015 and receiving a proclamation from the New York City Council. She recently announced her intention to step down from her position as the artistic director and conductor of the JHO, and it is my intention in this episode to chronicle her journey leading up to the founding of the JHO, as well as her thought processes and approach to running the orchestra to help guide the group as it moves forward. Before we dive into the episode and learn more about Pat's remarkable journey, first, a word from the Jackson Heights Beautification Group, the parent organization under which the JHO operates.
It's time once again for Summer Sundays in the Park. Since 2004, Jackson Heights Beautification Group has been bringing stellar artists to Travers Park every Sunday in the summertime. There's something for everyone, from classic rock to South Asian drums, along with dance and jazz. Queens, and Jackson Heights in particular, is known and lauded for its diversity, so why not celebrate that diversity through music? This summer is no different when we welcome on July 2nd the Jackson Heights Orchestra. Jackson Heights' own resident orchestra will appear to begin on the 2023 season. And on July 16th, we welcome the Afro-Latineers led by Paul Rivera. July 23rd will be the Second Life Trio featuring Manuel Valera, Alex Goodman, and Jimmy McBride. Be sure to check out this amazing trio led by electric keyboardist Manuel Valera. Stay tuned for more announcements on Summer Sundays.
Pat, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Chad. It's nice to be here.
Okay, let's start with a little biographical background. Can you tell us about your background in music and how you became a violinist? Did you grow up in a musical family? Was there sort of music all around you growing up?
Well, that's a really good question. Yeah, my uncle played the violin, my brother played the violin, my mother played piano, my dad sang in the church choir and in the garage. No, actually in the car. Yeah, it's a pretty musical family. I started playing the violin when I was 5 years old, studied privately until I was probably about 23. I was involved in music from day one in public school education. And then, junior high was in the orchestra, and I picked up my baton in junior high, and my teacher was a very avid conductor, and she gave me a lot of experience on the podium and working with my peers. And I conducted my first concert, I guess, when I was in 9th grade for our spring concert. Continuing on into high school, I conducted more. It took a little more convincing with the new orchestra teacher. And there I was in choir, jazz band. I played French horn. I played marching band, concert band, violinist. I was concertmaster of the orchestra. And then, of course, all the other activities that Sacramento had to offer. All county, youth orchestra, you name it, I was there. Then I studied music in college. I took 2 degrees in performance in theory and composition, where I had an opportunity to conduct my own pieces and those of my fellow colleagues, those that would let me. Women were not so encouraged to pursue the area of conducting, But fortunately, along the way, I had a wonderful professor, George Buckby, who had been living and studying in Finland, and he was also a major conductor there of the opera, the National Opera. And he knew how important it was to promote and give students podium time. And he let me conduct my first opera in college, and I worked on the different opera scenes and workshops and whatnot. And I formed my own group so that I could perform and conduct more of my own pieces and, just get in front of a group and have a lot of podium time. Fast forward, Sibelius Academy. I went there to study. Jorma Panala was there, Jukka-Pekka Saraste, Esa-Pekka Salonen, all the big names. We formed our own little conducting group. The headmaster didn't want me to be in the class. Jorma sort of snuck me in anyway, and I think he wanted me more for my violin talents, and because we all played an instrument in our own little group if we were going to have some podium time. And he was fortunate enough, Jorma was very kind. He made me assistant concertmaster of the orchestra, and I joined another ensemble that we went on tour in Norway and Sweden, and then eventually I went back to Finland, and I played professionally in an orchestra there. I didn't pursue much conducting at that time. I let it be known that I wanted to conduct, but really I was there to perform and play, and I focused on being a good orchestra member and knowing what it's like to be in a professional setting on the other side of the stick. We worked with a lot of different conductors, and many of them are famous now. They're all my age old, so it's all good.
Yeah, you and I share that background of having grown up in the California Central Valley and moving to New York later. What was the reason that you chose to move to New York? What brought you here?
I knew somebody. I was tired of being in Finland, and it was time for me to go. I had been there like 5 years, and it was, I think I was in my mid-20s by that point, and it's every time you move, it's hard to relocate and get established and all of that. So I thought, I should go back to the States. And I had already done the Bay Area thing in San Francisco, and I had outgrown that. I played in every orchestra except the San Francisco Symphony, basically. So I felt that the Bay Area was a little too small for me. I know that's really egotistical, but, I played in the Carmel Orchestra, Stockton, Santa Rosa, Monterey, you name it. I mean, I was like, every night it was a different orchestra. I had to make sure I had to keep concert clothes in my car and all the highways there, they're all clover leaves. And, I'd be like wanting to go south but I'd be going north, and I'd be like, but it was a really easy fix because, I just get off at the next clover leaf and just, change directions.
Yeah, I felt the same way. I mean, I also lived in San Francisco for 5 years and driving up and down the Half Moon Bay, musical theater all over the Bay Area, South Bay Peninsula, East Bay, Fremont, everywhere, right?
Right. I was actually in a program called a CETA program. It was Comprehensive Education Training Act in the 70s. And we had a quintet, a woodwind quintet, and a quartet based out of Belmont, I believe. We also had a pianist. So we could go around to schools. We played at the airport. We played all over the place and made nice, good living back then, like $700 a month. So, and living in San Francisco, that actually went a long way.
Yeah, back then real estate was much cheaper there.
Without a doubt. So New York, I had a couple of friends, and I said, hey, I'm coming to New York. So I had a suitcase, my violin, and a couple of dollars, and that was in 83, I think, and the rest is kind of history. I went into education because that had been my first love.
Well, I was going to ask you next, what inspired you to pursue a career as a music educator?
Well, growing up, I think my mom was a teacher. Whatever grade I was in, that was the grade I wanted to teach. When I was in elementary school, I'm going to be an elementary school teacher. When I was in junior high, I'm going to be a junior high teacher, and et cetera. So when I was in college, I'm going to be a professor, right? Anyway, so that it sort of happened after I retired. But my first job was here in New York as a junior high school string teacher. I took my cooperating teacher went on sabbatical, and I got hired for her position. And then the principal just kept me on when she came back, and then I found another string position, which I really enjoyed, in another school in the same district in Queens. And then I got involved with the Saturday borough-wide program, and then I became the center director. And then eventually, after 12 years of doing that, I moved on to the high school level and built a program at Long Island City High School and got very involved. And then I got my supervisor's license, and I became an assistant principal. And then I was interim acting director of music for the city for 6 months. And I was supervisor for all the borough-wide programs. And I hosted a lot of professional developments for teachers. And I was very involved in education. But the one thing that I always held true to was that I wanted to conduct. And though I had student groups all along the way, and we've performed in Carnegie Hall, and we've had wonderful, wonderful relationships within the New York City community, what I really wanted to do was conduct. So fast forward, I retired. Again, I got hired at NYU. I was hired at Hunter College, and I was like, Pat, you gotta, keep your eye on the apple here. What you want to do is make music. Everybody saw me more as an educator than as a conductor. So I found the opportunity in Jackson Heights to start the Jackson Heights Orchestra. I didn't know what it was going to look like. I didn't know how it was going to happen. But what I did do is I made all the concert dates first, before I even had an orchestra, because I'm musicians are very deadline driven. If you have a concert, you're going to practice. You have a recital, you're going to practice. I mean, some people just practice for fun. I was never like that. My violin teacher said, Pat, you need to have a recital every 6 weeks. That's the only way to get you into your instrument to the level that you need to be. Well, I did end up playing professionally, and I do get a pension from the union, so I guess I didn't do too poorly.
You continued to play throughout your teaching career?
I did continue to play professionally throughout my education career. Yes. I have been with many groups for a long period of time. As I got older, I could choose more of what I really wanted to do, and, I didn't have to take every pickup group that came along. I could really choose. And fortunately, I had a wonderful career in New York as a professional musician. I mean, I wasn't really on the A team, but I could handle myself, and I love pit work. But I played as a ringer in every community orchestra along the way. And I also played, in professional groups.
You said you started conducting in 9th grade, is that right?
This is probably before, but I did my first concert in 9th grade, yes.
So did you know you wanted to be a conductor before that, or was that?
Oh, yeah, always. Oh, yeah. It was something I always wanted to do. Unless you had a lot of family money, or unless you were a guy. And I wasn't a guy, and I didn't have a lot of family money. I mean, enough to go to school, in a private school, a college, of course, but not to help subsidize an orchestra, for example, or send me to Aspen or send me to some of the major summer camps where you can get recognized, or like Interlochen or wherever, Tanglewood or all of that. And women just weren't promoted, So I sort of just kind of did my job to the best of my ability for what I was doing. And I remember meeting somebody in Finland. It was an American woman who was in the recording business. I still remember the restaurant where we were and where we were sitting, but she goes, whatever you do, she must have been old at that time. I think she was in her 30s. And she goes, whatever you do, don't lose sight of your dream. don't ever lose what you want to do with your life. Those words really held true to me. They really stuck in my brain. It was like, it's not too late till it's really too late. And so when I retired, I was in a position where I had the time and money to start the orchestra with the help of the Jackson Heights Beautification group. So at that point, we started in 2012. And I remember I was in Geneva, Switzerland, and Ellen, my other half, had put something on the chat board. I guess they were chat boards back then. And Jackson Heights, there's a new orchestra starting. And so if you're interested, contact Pat Glunt. So I'm in Geneva. I'm getting all these calls and emails from different organizations, like the Post and the Daily News, or if that still exists, I'm not sure. Anyway, everybody wanted to interview me and talk about the orchestra. And I'm like, they were like, can you come in? And I go, well, I can't. I'm in Switzerland right now. But, we'll just do email and you can write the article. So those stars were aligned. Then other local newspapers picked it up. And then pretty soon I got a call from NBC or ABC, one of the major networks, and said, can I come in on the morning show and talk about the new orchestra that's starting? And I'm like, well, I really can't. I'm in Geneva right now. I'm sorry.
Can't join live via satellite.
They wanted me to, but you should come in. And I forget whose show it was, like a Sunday morning at 6 a.m. And I'm like, you want me to come into my pajamas at 6 a.m. for a live TV broadcast? And I was like, anyway, it wasn't going to happen. And then pretty soon, we had some auditions and like 5 people showed up. And then we had Hurricane Sandy to deal with. That was our first major obstacle. So our second rehearsal was supposed to be on a Tuesday night, and the subway was shut down, and Sandy was approaching, and it was really we did not have rehearsal that night.
So you started the orchestra under the umbrella of the Jackson Heights Beautification group. Is that an uncommon way to start a community orchestra, or is that somewhat a way that people tend to go? Just for people out there who may be wanting to start an orchestra later.
I had studied every piece of literature on how to start a community orchestra. I did all the research. I attended concerts in Jackson Heights. I attended, and I'm like, if you're going to succeed, you have to have a well-known organization behind you. And in this community, that was the Jackson Heights Beautification group. And I went to Ed Wesley and I said, Ed, I'm thinking of starting an orchestra. What do you think about this? He goes, it's a great idea. We'll give you $500. I was like, oh, great. How should I spend that? So I started the group, and we got, they were able to arrange rehearsals at the Methodist Community Church. And so I had a little room, and I think that's where all my hearing problems came in, because we had a room about the size of my dining room to rehearse in, and the acoustics, I should have worn earplugs, but I didn't. We eventually moved to a bigger room, and then eventually we got down into the basement where it was much nicer, and we had more room to spread out, and we could grow and all of that. We performed the first 3 years at the Methodist Church, but then the cellists had to start playing in the hallway because we didn't have enough room in the church itself for the orchestra. It was a little bit awkward, to say the least. But that's where we started, and then eventually in the fall of 2015, we moved to St. Mark's, which I had my eye on that church for at least 20 years, I guess, as far as I thought it was a beautiful space. I thought it'd be great for a small chamber orchestra, and it's worked out really well, and I hope we continue to perform there, and, who knows?
How do you view the role that the JHO plays in the community?
That's a great question. I probably didn't realize what an important role it did play. We were pretty awful in the beginning. It was just so the first concert was in December of 2012, and we had 9 people in the orchestra. I'm like, I can't have a concert with only 9 people.
Was it all strings, or did you have
No, we
winds
had
and brasses?
we had like one clarinet and a bass clarinet and one French horn, an oboe, a trumpet, maybe two violins, not even a viola, cello, one cello and a bass, and a flute. So I'm like, I better go get some more musicians to beef this up. So I begged, borrowed, stole, paid off some musicians to come and play our first concert. And so I think we played our first concert with like about 18 people or 15. Joe Bartolozzi made all the arrangements for us. He arranged practically everything that we were doing so that we could perform it with some sort of integrity. We had in the audience, I didn't know if anybody was going to show up. So 150 people showed up.
That's great. That's a great
Yeah.
turnout.
And I was like, oh, they were just curious, And we started the concert tradition with a reception for everyone afterwards. And this is where we get into the role of how the JHO plays in our community. The importance of bringing community together under a common goal without any sort of prejudice or differences. They're here to come see a concert. They're here to go get a little bit of refreshments afterwards, talk to your neighbors who you haven't seen.
It's very different than going to like the New York Philharmonic. You don't really, talk to people afterwards or, hang out with each other
Well, it
afterwards.
depends on who you are. I made a lot of friends at the last Philharmonic concert that I went to in the audience, but that's not so often, not that really doesn't happen very often. But you're right. Most people, they play the concert and then they're gone. They go home, they go their separate ways.
That's right.
And I wanted to build a sense of community where everybody was invited to meet the orchestra members, meet the soloists, meet me. They didn't know me. I had been working and then I was retired and now all of a sudden I start this orchestra. It became very important to the community and to people of all different ages to come together and differences and it really reflects the diversity of our community. And a lot of people feel that there's great comfort in that. The audience members are so supportive. Like I said, we didn't start out the strongest ensemble in the world. But you know what? It wasn't so much about that in the beginning. I mean, of course, we want to do our best. And if our best is like a grade C, then that's our best, But we didn't stay there. Every concert got better. There are, challenges to every single concert that comes along the way. But what it's done for the community is that all the political leaders have been very supportive. They understand. The real estate people feel that it's helped with the value of the community, as far as housing. Well, Jackson Heights has its own orchestra. Not every neighborhood can say that. And, since then, a lot have come into existence. But in Queens, it's really been a hard one. We're the only ones that sustained a major setting as a community orchestra. Every other orchestra has either folded or they became a pickup group or they became all paid musicians.
And to survive across COVID shutdowns.
Yes, mostly choir groups didn't come back to survive. The community choir organizations, church choirs and whatnot, that took them a longer time to come back, especially in this community. Not necessarily elsewhere, but in Jackson Heights in particular, and New York City.
Who would you say is your biggest conducting influence, and how have they impacted your approach to leading the Jackson Heights Orchestra?
That's a really hard question. I've been doing this a long, long time, and as a orchestral musician, you look at a variety of different conductors and you take what you like and you take what you don't like. I mean, I suppose if I had to choose somebody, it would be my mentor, George Buckby, because he really gave me a lot of opportunity and gave me some guidance on how to figure out tempo and whatnot. But as far as orchestra rehearsal, with a community orchestra in so many different levels, I try not to get into the nitty-gritty of, I'm not here to tell you how to play your instrument. I'm here to guide a vision of what I think a piece should sound like. And it's up to you as the musician to figure out how that is going to happen. A lot of people, a lot of conductors really micromanage every single note and dot and everything that is on the page of the score. And I'm more, I would say, a gestalt or global type of person. I look at, unless the editing is true to what the composer had intended, I find the editing markings are, they're not consistent. This doesn't really answer your question, but I think that the biggest influence is obviously my experience sitting in an orchestra and learning what I want to see and what I don't want to see.
From a conductor.
And people who have worked under me, they like that I'm very clear with my conducting, my technique. And I am really, they have considered me an orchestra's conductor. I'm not about me. I'm not showing off my great beautiness of my hands and flow and my long flowing hair, which I don't have anymore. It's not a look at me, I'm so great type of attitude. I'm here to serve the ensemble. I am here to serve them, make them the best that I can. And I try to do that through kindness and leadership of inspiration. And I try to reach them on a level that perhaps they hadn't really considered looking at a piece at before. They have to take responsibility for their own musicianship and how they play a piece, especially in the woodwinds and brass. They're all solo instruments in an orchestra. In the strings, you have your leaders. You have many choices of what type of bowings you want to do and all of that. But really, I really just want a very clear, a rich, beautiful sound. I don't want to sound like an amateur ensemble. I'm always striving to bring the ensemble to another level. And whether we ever reach that or not, I think that the closest was probably the concert I didn't conduct because I was ill. But we were very well prepared for that. We resurrected Beethoven's Seventh. The orchestra knew that inside and out. And the Mozart, that was clear cut.
The Marriage of Figaro.
The Marriage of Figaro, yes. And then Roger's piece, I was just so happy he stepped up to conduct it, and it just brought a whole nother element. And I know the orchestra had their own challenges because they were under a new leadership, but you know what? They have to believe in themselves. And that's what I really try to instill more than anything else, the fact that they are small enough, and I try to treat it like a chamber ensemble. And I try to rehearse it like a chamber ensemble.
How do you choose the repertoire for each concert, and what factors do you consider when selecting the pieces to perform?
Well, that's a really good question. And, there are a lot of different factors. First, I go by time. How much time do I want? I was the first one to do this in the New York area, that I did concerts without any intermission. I wanted a concert to last an hour and 15 minutes with no intermission. And so the first constraints are timing. How many pieces? What's it going to look like? And over the years, I found that in the fall, I like to look more at the Baroque and classical works along with new works. The March concert is a bigger arena of major works.
That's where you would do the major symphonies like Beethoven 7.
Yes, we've done the first, third, seventh, and we've done the Sibelius Violin Concerto, Hindemith Horn Concerto. We've done some wonderful new works. We've done a clarinet concerto, oboe concerto. We've done a lot of different concertos through the years. Saxophone, Glazunov. So I try to offer a little bit of something different at every concert. And then in the main concert, people start fading out. And so I try to do a lot of little pieces. I won't say it's exactly like a pops concert, but I've learned not to do anything of any serious weight because people go on vacation. You have spring break, you have Easter break, you have school concerts for teachers and obligation. I mean, it's just like everybody goes away. So you want to pick out pieces that are very easy to put together. So that's one consideration. The other is the audience, and the other is instrumentation. How much doubling is there? What can I get?
Yeah, because the church only fits so many musicians. We can't have 80 people in there on stage.
No, we can't. And we are at the max with about 35. We've done a little bit more, but this next concert is going to be tight because we're bringing in a harp and we're bringing in a trombone.
Yeah, some extra brass, yeah.
Some extra brass and more percussion. We'll have more percussion than just timpani. So that will, we'll have some chimes and we'll have some bells and, we'll have a bass drum and things that take up space. We don't have a lot of space. So you have to figure out, well, what can we do without and still maintain the integrity of the piece?
What would you say are there one or two great highlights of your time leading this orchestra for the last 10, 11 years?
Well, obviously, the first concert brought me to tears because we actually did it. I had no idea where it was going to go after that. So the second concert, I was like, oh, nobody's going to show up because the first concert, they were just curious. Well, the second concert, we had a new group of people, and they weren't all, everybody was joking, oh, they're all your friends, Pat. And well, yes, I brought a lot of tennis friends and golfing friends. And, I'm active outside of the community in Jackson Heights. And so people in my teaching career spans a lot, and the people I have met over the years. So obviously the first concert was a highlight.
What about musical highlights?
Musical highlight, I think the first time we did something that wasn't an arrangement was, I think we did the Surprise Symphony by Haydn. That was that's like a breakthrough. We did something that was not an arrangement for a community orchestra or like a high-level high school or college level. It was a real piece. And when we started doing more and more real pieces, I knew that we were taking hold with the quality of the ensemble. One of the major concerts it wasn't actually the concert itself that was a highlight. I had commissioned a work by Nina Sinakova. She wrote a piece for 2 violins and orchestra, and we had this in the works for like 2 years. It was going to be performed, I believe, in March of 2016. And so she gave it to me. I'm like, Nina, I need the piece. So finally I got the piece in January.
She won a composing award for that piece, right?
She did. She won a big award. And so the fact that I commissioned the work, it was performed. We had the most horrific snowstorm the night before. She couldn't come up from Philadelphia. Our soloists were coming down from Boston. We got snowed in. They had to spend the night here, husband and wife. And another member of the orchestra who lived on Long Island spent the night here. So after the church didn't clear the sidewalk, nobody could get to the dress rehearsal. Everybody showed up for the concert. We didn't really have a dress, and we got through this piece. And when I first saw the score, I said to myself, this is going to be a winner. This should be part of the repertoire, standard repertoire for the 21st century. I just knew it was great. So then fast forward maybe a year or 6 months later, she submits it to a composition competition. That's really hard to say.
Tongue tie, yeah.
In St. Petersburg in Russia. So she emails me that she came in the top 10 finals for this, and they were flying her over there for the final concert and for everything to be judged what was going to take first place. So they fly her over to Russia. She's texting me the whole time. I won. I came in first place. I won the grand prize. I forget how many rubles it was. I mean, it was a lot of rubles. It didn't translate into a lot of dollars, but it was more than enough. But what came of that is that she's like so hot, we can't touch her anymore. You know, I mean, she got on interviewed and throughout the whole Russia area and Belarus. She's from there originally, and you know, she's back here in the States, and she's written so many wonderful works, and she's a wonderful jazz musician and pianist.
Well, that's an amazing accomplishment to have commissioned such a great work that won awards. You played the world premiere in Jackson Heights, helped launch your career. You must feel very good about that.
I do. I still get goosebumps. You know, it's like I'm very. That's one of my very proud moments. And then Joe Bartolozzi also. I commissioned a work for him for percussion and orchestra, and that also won a major award down in Brazil, and to the point where he was commissioned to write another work for some premiere down there. But again, he submitted the piece that he had written for our orchestra, and he submitted also not only the score but the tape and the audio recording of it. So I feel I have been a catalyst in providing opportunities for voices that may not necessarily have been heard in such a way.
Yeah, and that's a great thing that the orchestra plays that role, not just for the community, but it's affecting globally, you know, creating music for everybody.
Well, it is, and it's part of our mission statement that, you know, that we promote local talent, living composers and performers, and you know, with only three major concerts a year, that's hard to achieve at every concert. So what's the criteria for local? How local are we? Well, I like to get in at least one new work a year, but it's usually 2 years in the making. And because of the pandemic, and I didn't know how we were going to proceed and what my role was going to be, I really haven't planned anything for the upcoming season, you know, because I didn't, people usually come to me. You wouldn't believe how many scores I get every year. At the beginning, I get at least 10 to 20 scores. Pat, will you perform one of our pieces? Will you do this? And usually now I just go after people that local artists. Like I just recently reached out to Ed Smaldone, who's a composition professor at Queens College. And I said, hey, Ed, I always wanted to do one of your pieces. And so, you know, it doesn't mean it can't be done. I can't recommend it to the Jackson Heights Orchestra in the future because, you know, you don't get more local than Queens College. And he's been an instrumental composer in our community for 30 years. So I think it would be a real honor if the orchestra keeps the tradition going after I leave, that they continue to promote local talent. And now that doesn't mean that every soloist has to be from here. I mean, I've had people from California and Ohio and Chicago come out and play with us, and usually through connections, you know, and I can't pay them a lot, but I usually put them up for the week, you know, that they're in New York. I have that luxury of doing that for a number of years. But again, I hope the orchestra continues in that manner of promoting local talent and commissioning new works and reaching out and showing them that we're still here. And you know, the part of that, you know, you ask about what goes into picking repertoire. I mean, I have to find things that are appropriate for the audience. I just didn't throw new music at them. This took years of starting with living composers who wrote tonal music. And it was a building of trust between my repertoire decisions and what the audience was going to listen to. And after a while, they begin to trust you that if they have an unfamiliar name on the program and it's a new work, they're excited about that. They're not running away.
It's always a balance with trying to have works that they're familiar with and then introduce them to new things, I would imagine.
It is. I mean, we just did that new work. Well, it's not so new, but it was the world premiere with the orchestra, the cello concerto and the diversament. You know, the audience, from what I understand, the audience response was very, very positive to that. And that's what you want to hear. The other day, I was at a New York Philharmonic concert, and they did a whole new work for bass and flute, and Suzanne Malky conducted, and the piece was about 25 minutes long, and it was based, a Brazilian composer had written it. And I think he'd actually studied at Queens College too. But it was very atonal. And it had every sound you could possibly imagine. Electrified flute. They had a bass flute. I mean, the bass flute must have been 9 feet long. I mean, like, and the bassist Esmeralda was singing and into the mic and playing her bass, and the orchestra, the audience gave it a standing ovation afterwards. They were screaming with joy, and I was like, finally, we're getting, enough. It's going to be an exciting year for the Philharmonic when Dudamel takes over.
Absolutely. There's a lot of excitement for that.
There is, without a doubt. But slowly, they can't be afraid of doing new things, and that's what we've done here in Jackson Heights. We have presented a variety of new and old classics and how to keep the orchestra interested. You can't just do new music. That won't keep anybody interested. You can't just do one kind of music. You have to keep everybody involved and open up the minds in the genres. We've had jazz concerts. We've had a variety of different kinds of concerts.
What about in terms of classics? Are there any particular classics that the community was really excited about? Sold out, turning away people at the door, that type of thing.
Yes, that's a good question, Chad. We sold out when we did the Four Seasons. We had to turn people away. We sold out when we did parts of the Messiah. I'm not sure we had to turn people away or we just had standing room. And we did really well when we did the Brandenburg Series. Most of these concerts were like on Saturdays. I did a lot of add-on concerts from the regular Wednesday night concerts.
I didn't know that.
I would do one add-on like in February when it was kind of quiet, and do a Saturday. So I would do like, we did some children's program, like we invite the families beforehand and talk about the pieces and bring the children in, and then at a certain time, then we would play the concert and more people would fill in. And that worked out very nicely. Yeah, we did that for like 3 or 4 years or 5 years.
So Handel, Vivaldi, Bach, big hits.
Yeah, the big hits. I've never been one for a thematic type of programming. I think it's a little convoluted. I know some people really like that. I mean, I might find a theme after I pick out the repertoire, but I'm not going to create a theme and then find the repertoire to fit it. I don't like it. And I think that I don't like to program one kind of music for a complete concert. I think I like variety. I have to admit, I was against doing the Brandenburgs.
Why?
Well, we did 3 of the 6. And we did them at St. Joseph's in Astoria, and we did them here at St. Mark's. I just, it's not my kind of programming. But it was a success. People like that. I am not afraid to admit when I'm wrong about something, but it may not be my first go-to. And I prefer not to do that kind of programming. The Four Seasons obviously go together.
Right. Well, sometimes people just play spring, right? It's like,
Well, yeah, but no, we featured one of the violinists from the orchestra. We had, okay, so Susan Metcalf played, Allie King played, Natalie Kriegler played. She had been a person who played with our orchestra on occasion, and Claire Birmingham, who lived in the neighborhood, who didn't play with our orchestra, but she's kind of a Baroque expert, so she was a logical person to bring. So they all brought something different to each season that they were playing. And that was a real highlight, but we had to turn people away, and it was not a free concert. We charged.
oh, did you pre-sell tickets?
We did. We pre-sold tickets, and we had some reserved at the door, and the line was down the block. We could not fit everybody in.
It's a good problem to have. It's unfortunate to turn people away who want to see music, but it's a good problem to have. All right, let's switch gears and talk about the upcoming concert. The next concert's on Wednesday, May 17th, 2023 at St. Mark's Cathedral in Jackson Heights. You have announced that this is your final concert as the music director of the Jackson Heights Orchestra. You're retiring, so because it's your final concert, are you picking highlights from the time that as running this orchestra, or how did you approach that?
Not necessarily. Actually, they were do-overs. They were mulligans before. So
you performed these before, and you wanted
another
run at them.
I wanted another chance at them. Yeah.
Okay.
I wanted to. Some of them were done when we first started the group, and so the pieces are beautiful. They stand on their own as far as, I mean, the Sibelius. We really played. We played that well when we played it at St. Joseph's, but we played it at St. Joseph's. We didn't play it here at St. Mark's. I wanted the orchestra and the audience to hear that again, because we really played that well before.
Now, you studied at the Sibelius Academy. You mentioned that in Finland.
I did.
And we're playing the Sibelius piece. Is there any tie-in there? Do you feel a particular affinity towards Sibelius, having studied there and lived there?
I do. And, I had the pleasure of working under Jussi Jallis, who was Sibelius's son-in-law. I mean, Jussi was old when he conducted Beethoven's Ninth. And that was a real honor to play. I mean, when you're in Finland, you can't help but be drawn towards Sibelius and its nationalism of his music, and to know it's just like it's in your pores, it's in your soul, and so I think I have a little different perspective on Sibelius than if you just study Sibelius outside of Finland. I mean, I played professionally in a Finnish orchestra for a number of years, and that really gives you a real sense of how it can be.
Well, without going into any deep pre-concert lecture type material, is there anything you could say about the Coralian overture that maybe people wouldn't know if they hadn't had your background in Finland?
Probably not, except that the area of Coralia was, Finland used to be much bigger than it is now. Right now, it's about the size of Florida or California. It's long and narrow. It used to have a big chunk closer to Russia, and it was the most, some would say it was the most beautiful part of Finland, but it was taken by the Russians during the World War II. It's kind of what they lost.
And that area is called Coralia.
Yes. I'm not sure people really know that.
No, I didn't know that, yeah. And you have some French composers, some Debussy, some Fauré.
Yeah, I went a little heavy on that probably, but again, I wanted some do-overs. The Fauré we performed at PS 69. I really like the piece a lot. I just wanted to do it again in a tighter environment. It was the PS 69, even though the acoustics are great, we had a great audience of like 400. I felt the sound was a little bit lost in there because the stage was so small and we were so tight.
This is Mask at Berg. I don't even know how to
say
it.
The Mask
at Bergamo.
Yeah, Bergamo, yeah. That was the one that we stumble over, yes.
How do you pronounce it?
I don't. I avoid it with every inch of my body. I avoid it totally.
Hey everyone, Chad from the future here. I called my friend from Paris to ask him for the correct French pronunciation of these pieces, so credit to Edward Servan-Schreiber for pronouncing these pieces correctly for us.
Masque et bergamasque by Fauré.
And then the Debussy.
Clair de lune and rêverie by Debussy.
The Clair de Lune and Reverie. I mean, they're just such beautiful pieces that I just wanted to do them. You know, I just wanted to do them again.
So all of these are works that you've done before?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, those were done early on, like in 2013, 2014, you know, and we didn't have a lot of instruments there. So I wanted a do-over.
How do you plan to stay involved in the world of music after retiring from the orchestra?
Well, I'll always be involved. Time will tell. All things will be revealed when it's time.
Do you hope to do a lot of guest conducting, traveling around? I mean, maybe you're doing that already. I don't know.
do that already. So, you know, I mean, I don't do a lot. I would like to do more. I just did some work in Tampa with all-state orchestra performance and worked with some wonderful teachers. And it'd be great if they would bring me into work with their classes, you know, around the Sarasota area.
All right. Well, I think we should wrap it up. I want to thank you for sitting down with me today. I think this community of the community in general, but also the community musicians, owes you a huge debt of gratitude for the work you've done. And I hope everybody listening to this comes to your final performance on May 17th and
bring your chair.
Bring your chair. Yeah, it might be standing room only. So
that's right.
All right. Thanks, Pat, for sitting down today.
Hey, thanks, Chad. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.